Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face when you're sleeping.
Over the years, we've had innocent people as young as 16 years old presented on this list, being incarcerated in prison for heinous crimes they didn't commit. Recent advancement in technology and DNA testing has been instrumental in freeing wrongfully committed prisoners. Some of the cases highlighted below show coercion from investigative officers, taking advantage of the age and mental capacity of minors, misrepresentation, and concealment of evidence, manipulating convictions. This beats the logic that truth and justice are what makes up the criminal justice system. How do you even compensate these wrongly convicted prisoners? Number 10. Horace Roberts. Horace Robert was found guilty of the murder of Terry Creek, who was his lover and workmate at the time. On the night of the 13th of August 1998, Terry Creek was found strangled on the shore of Lake Corona, leaving behind an estranged husband and 2 children. An abandoned truck and watch found near the victim was the only evidence to tie Mr. Horace to the crime scene. On the weight of this sole piece of evidence, Horace Robert, whose only crime as presented by his co-workers was lying to the investigators about his extramarital affair with the deceased, was convicted. Horace Roberts in 1999 was then convicted for second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. A law school clinical program, the California Innocence Project, founded in the same year he was incarcerated, was instrumental for his release 20 years later at the age of 60. The CIP's mission is to free innocent prisoners who have been committed through a review of crime scene evidence and DNA testing. DNA testing exonerated Horace and pointed to the true perpetrators as 2 other men, and the victim's husband, who staged the crime scene and were brought to book. His case is proof enough that one can spend decades in prison despite being innocent. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it. It really works. Number 9. Daniel Lorenzo Villegas. An El Paso, Texas appeal court in 2013 overturned Daniel Villegas' conviction, setting him on the road to freedom. Just at the age of 16, while living in El Paso, Texas, Daniel Villegas, a high school student, was accused of opening fire on 4 teenagers walking home from a house party on the 10th of April 1993 from the passenger seat of a moving vehicle, killing 2 of the teens, Armando Lazo, 17, and 18-year-old Bobby England, instantly. Villegas did not have any prior convictions and faced capital murder charges. The first trial in 1994 ended as mistrial due to a hung jury, though in the next year, the jury came back with a guilty verdict and Villegas was sentenced to life imprisonment because the prosecutors did not pursue a death penalty. Jesse Hernandez and Juan Medina, the other 2 teens on the scene, later told police they could not identify the shooter. Daniel Villegas, in the company of Rodney Williams, Fernando Lujan, Marcos Gonzalez, and Enrique Ramirez, was offered plea bargains throughout the interrogation against each other to get a confession. Villegas was manipulated to confess to the crime. The investigative officers attempted to match their statements, although it still contained inconsistencies, which later led to Gonzalez's charges being dismissed. Villegas recanted his confession later on to a juvenile probation officer, but it was too late. Villegas was charged with capital murder and convicted. After 18 years in prison, his conviction was overturned in 2013 as new evidence was presented. It showed that Rodney Williams was coerced and threatened, and witnesses were forced to pin the crime on the accused. And neither did Villegas' account of the murder weapon match the gun used for the crime. Number 8. Brian Banks. In 2002, a rising football star, 17-year-old Brian Banks, was wrongly convicted of sexual assault. At the time of his conviction, a high school acquaintance, Juanetta Gibson, accused Banks of sexual assault and kidnapping, with Banks stating the sexual encounter within the school campus was consensual, contrary to the claims placed by Miss Gibson. Legal counsel for the defense advised Brian Banks to accept a plea bargain to spend 4 years of prison confinement, as this allows him to pursue his football career as he would still be young enough to do so, rather than going through a hearing that opens him up to the risk of a 41-year to life imprisonment, including a lifetime registration on the sex offender database. Miss Gibson later went on to sue the Long Beach Unified School District. The school offered to have their case conjoined with Brian Banks against Miss Gibson, but the defense advised against this. Miss Gibson placed a claim there was lax in security at the school, creating an unsafe environment that provided an enabling environment for the assault, receiving $1.5 million as compensation. Miss Gibson later recanted her statement on Facebook, acknowledging she had fabricated her story, allowing Brian Banks to appeal for his case to be reopened for review with the help of the California Innocence Project. The district attorney's office, after launching new investigations and a fresh review of the evidence, concluded Brian Banks was wrongfully convicted. In 2012, after 9 years, Judge Mark C. reversed his conviction, ending his tribulations and his exoneration and road to freedom. On his release, Banks said, "There comes a time when you have to let go and move on. The only thing I wasn't going to let go was this fight. And this instant, a worthy fight for his future it was." You want to find out more? Catch the movie made on Brian Banks' story as he follows his journey to freedom. Number 7. KWAME AJAMU. In Cleveland, Ohio, a young teenager at the age of 16, KWAME AJAMU, aka Ronnie Bridgman, was sentenced to death in 1975 for the murder and robbery of Harold Frank, a money order salesman, from the sole evidence of a coerced 13-year-old Eddie Vernon who placed KWAME, his brother Wiley Bridgman, and their friend Ricky Jackson at the murder scene. Eddie Vernon later wanted to recant his statement before he made the police lineup, but the prosecutors informed him it was too late to do so. There was no physical forensic evidence established by prosecution tying the accused to the crime, and none of the accused had a prior criminal record. All three had credible alibis as presented by the defense witnesses, but were all still sentenced to death nonetheless. Cleveland Scene magazine narration of the case, highlighting inconsistencies of Eddie Vernon's testimony, unearthed new evidence in the form of Eddie's confession of his lies to his pastor, who later went on to swear an affidavit to this effect. After serving 28 years in prison, in January 2003, with the help of the Ohio Innocence Project, KWAME was released on parole. 11 years later, in December 2014, KWAME was exonerated and his conviction overturned nearly 40 years after his trial. His parole opened up the avenue for his brother Wiley and Jackson to pursue their convictions to be overturned, which Judge Richard McMonagle granted after a new trial in November 2014, leading to their release. From his experience, KWAME now serves the Board of Witness to Innocence in Ohio as chairman and traverses across the United States speaking against the death penalty. Number 6. Daniel Jones. Imagine your partner spinning a web of lies strong enough to convict you to prison. Well, that was the case for Daniel Jones, 31 years old, of New South Wales, Australia, whose wife, Sarah Jane Parkinson, accused him of 32 counts of sexual assault and domestic violence. Daniel, a former prison guard, met Miss Parkinson in 2011, later getting engaged after a few months of dating. Miss Parkinson narrated her troubled past to Mr. Jones, detailing how she had been sexually assaulted by a Turkish diplomat, who later fled out of the country before he could be charged to the effect. Miss Parkinson, who was then a police clerical assistant, began to spin lies to her co-workers, including an officer she was intimate with, by appearing to work with cuts and other injuries that she linked to Mr. Jones's violence. Accusations were later targeted to Mr. Jones, and he was arrested and convicted, spending 4.5 months in Goulburn prison. Mr. Jones's family took up legal aid to defend him, unearthing the truth over numerous false allegations, including a heart condition Miss Parkinson was suffering from that would lead to dizzy spells with tunnel vision, explaining the accidents that resulted in her bruises and cuts. The main reason that Miss Parkinson gave these accusations was a desire to send Mr. Jones to prison to gain possession of their assets and home. It may seem like a short period to be committed, but the trauma of knowing a loved one is responsible for your incarceration leaves scars that are hard to heal, as said by Mr. Jones on his release. Number 5. James Joseph Richardson. The statement, "You can pick your home and not your neighbor," holds for this case. On the 25th of October 1967, James Joseph Richardson, 31, and his wife, Annie Mae, requested their neighbor and part-time babysitter Reese to serve lunch to their 7 children on their return from school when they left for work. The children, aged 2 to 11, ate beans, rice, and a hog gravy and went back to school where they became ill, foaming from the mouth with fits. Every child died. An autopsy was done. The results came back as poisoning with parathion, a type of strong insecticide found in the children's guts from their lunch. Authorities searched Mr. Richardson's home, but found nothing. Later, Miss Reese, the babysitter, was seen arguing with another man over a bag of parathion, which they later claimed they found in Mr. Richardson's shed. The county sheriff, Frank Klein, also presented evidence Mr. Richardson had informed him 2 days before the incident he was intending to get an insurance policy on each of the children, his wife, and himself. On the grand jury hearing to follow, Klein further went to present witnesses who claimed Mr. Richardson was too calm after the incident and did not seem upset. After the deliberation, the jury indicted Richardson of the murder of one of the children, leading to his arrest. At trial, the prosecution gave additional evidence of 3 inmates who stated Mr. Richardson had confessed of giving the children parathion with their lunch in anger against his wife having a lesbian liaison with the babysitter, receiving a reduced sentence for being prosecution witnesses. Deliberation by the jury at the trial took less than 2 hours on the fateful day of May in 1968, and Richardson was convicted to death by electric chair. In 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court outlawed the death penalty. His sentence was commuted to 25 years to life imprisonment. A book written by Richardson's lawyers, Arcadia, in 1988, presented new evidence. Sworn statements to the workers in a nursing home where Reese was staying exonerated Richardson as she confessed to poisoning the children, and one of the jailmates recanted his statements, stating coercion and a promise of a reduced sentence for his evidence. A new trial presented new evidence in April of 1989. The judge on his ruling highlighted suppression of evidence from the defense attorney, denied Mr. Richardson's a fair trial, and set aside his conviction. Mr. Richardson was later given compensation of $1 million for his wrongful conviction. Reese died in 1982 from Alzheimer's and was never indicted for her crime. Number 4. Michael Hanline. A biker disappeared from his home in Ventura County, California in November 1978. A few days later, J.T. McGarry's body with multiple shot wounds was found dumped on the side of the road, 20 to 30 miles from his home. Over the coming weeks, Michael Hanline was arrested and convicted of the murder. Michael maintained his innocence 20 years to his conviction when he got help on the founding of the California Innocence Project. CIP uncovered sealed police reports before Michael's trial, showing other people had confessed to committing the crime, which was concealed from the defense attorney. Robertson in the DA's office requested a secret hearing without the presence of Michael or his attorney requesting for the reports to be sealed. The prosecution further intimidated witnesses testifying against Michael. Another witness placed Robertson and a prosecution attorney at JT's home the night of the murder. In October 2010, after a review of Michael's case, Judge Andrew Wistrich recommended his conviction be overturned. The prosecution had colluded to violate Michael's constitutional rights, and critical information was hidden from the defense. On October 24, 2014, Michael was released from prison, a free man. Number 3. Susan Marie Mellon. The only female on the list, Susan Marie Mellon, a mother of 3, was falsely accused of the gruesome murder of Rick Daley in 1967 in Lawndale, California. Susan was then living with Tom, her boyfriend, and 2 of her youngest children in his Redondo Beach apartment, moving to a house in Gardenia after Tom received an eviction notice. On the moving dates, Susan spent time with Jessica the whole day, moving small boxes to the new house, and later in the evening with Jim, Tom's father. The prosecution's case hangs on the sole testimony of an informant who testified Susan Mellon confessed to her on having committed the murder. The jury convicted Susan to live in prison based on this testimony. In 2013, new evidence emerged that the prosecution's informant was a pathological liar, and that several miles away, 3 male Lawndale gang members in an abandoned house were responsible for having savagely attacked Rick Daley. The Los Angeles County DA's office reopened the case. Susan filed a writ of habeas corpus arising from the credibility of the witness and her unreliable evidence, which was granted without opposition from the DA's office, and she was later released in October 2014 after more than 17 years in prison. And with that, it's now time for today's best pick. Today's photo was sent to us by a subscriber, so if you come across a photo online and want to know more details about it, just send it over to us. We might even feature it on our future video. Number 2. Luis Lorenzo Vargas. Tattoos can be a symbol of something important to the wearer, but can be the cause of 17 years of incarceration, as Luis Lorenzo Vargas, 46 years old, found out. In 1998 in Los Angeles, California, the gruesome sexual assault of 3 women was pinned on Mr. Vargas, on the evidence presented by 3 women identifying a tattoo similar to their attacker on the left eye of the accused. Vargas's alibi on his defense was he was at work when at least 2 of the assaults occurred. In 1999, the jury convicted Mr. Vargas to 55 years to life imprisonment based on the victims' wavering evidence and their pickup of Mr. Vargas in a lineup. In the same period, a serial rapist was operating with similar operandi and was by then credited to committing at least 39 sexual assaults in the periods leading from 1995 to 2015. The victim described the dubbed teardrop rapist, whose identity is unknown, as small-bodied with teardrop tattoos under his eyes. During the trial, the prosecution argued on the similarity of the 3 attacks and fronted they must have been committed by the same person. The California Innocence Project took up Mr. Vargas's case, generating new evidence that led the judge to overturn Vargas's conviction. CIP was able to prove a case of misidentification as Mr. Vargas did not fully match the identity of the attacker. Further, in 2013, upon review of the only DNA material in one of the cases, Mr. Vargas was not linked to the attack, nullifying the prosecution evidence following their argument on a similarity of the attacks, hence he could not have committed the other 2 as well. Besides, Vargas claimed prosecutors did not disclose similar assaults continued to occur even when he was in custody. On November 23, 2015, Mr. Vargas walked home a free man, and the teardrop rapist, unfortunately, is still out there. Number 1. Archie Williams. In a recent case of wrongful conviction, Archie Williams was wrongly convicted in 1983 at the age of 22 and spent 36 years in prison, convicted of attempted murder, rape, and assault of a 30-year-old white woman in East Baton Rouge County, Louisiana in 1982. His sentence upon conviction was life imprisonment without possibility of parole, despite sworn testimony from 3 witnesses who stated he was asleep at home at the time. The prosecution withheld, tampered with the evidence, and fabricated some, including encouraging the victim to pick out Mr. William in a police lineup, despite her evidence the attacker was tall with a scar on his chest. Mr. Williams is shorter and has no chest scar. Archie Williams was exonerated on March 21, 2019, following new evidence presented by the California Innocence Project on fingerprints that were picked on the scene but did not match Mr. Williams. William held on to his dreams to perform on the big stage, which he followed up on in his appearance on the new NBC talent show. On his audition on America's Got Talent, Mr. Williams narrated his experience, and he continued to describe, "They caged my body, but they never could cage my mind, and I forgive them." He went on to perform an outstanding rendition of "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me" with all the emotions of his lost years in incarceration.